walk into this room at your own risk, because it leads to the future. Not a future that will be, but one that might be. This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one. It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time. It has refinements, technological advances, and a more sophisticated approach to the destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the superstates that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
Pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news. I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news. I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news. Not the intelligent design of some God above the clouds, but our intelligent design.
We are really acquiring divine powers of creation and destruction. We are really upgrading humans into gods. We are acquiring, for instance, the power to re-engineer life. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over. The whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over.
This afternoon, the Secretary General and Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, will witness the signing of a memorandum of understanding on a strategic partnership between the UN and the World Economic Forum, which outlines areas of cooperation to deepen engagement between the two institutions and to jointly accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda.
We cannot hide away from human population growth because, you know, it underlies so many of the other problems. All these things we talk about wouldn't be a problem if there was the size of population that there was 500 years ago.
An ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. Oh, what does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on. Are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
It's going to be the fourth industrial revolution, an all-consuming industrial revolution right across the board. The speed of change 1,000 times faster than during the first industrial revolution, and affecting all services, all products, all countries, all industries, and all people. It's going to lead to job destruction, so we've got to think about the jobs of the future and how we create them. It's going to lead to massive technological change in the way we deliver services. It's going to force governments to change their minds about how they operate. And all this has been set out by Klaus Schwab in the speech he made in Abu Dhabi to the summit of the Agenda Council.
Virtually no traffic. You can go to different places very efficiently without using cars. There are no cars.
Not one single car?
It's going to be different types of transportation that are, like I said, environmentally friendly. There will be, it's based on renewable energy.
So I think the first thing that, because I mostly work with business, that business needs to do is deprive platforms that spread disinformation of oxygen. Stop advertising. Pull your promotion money. make sure that they understand that they have a consequential impact on society. And the boycott of Twitter for several months has had a modest impact, but I think the Facebook one failed. But the necessity of getting it right in the platforms that are probably primary source information for a third to 40% of people is urgent.
So let's say it is Russian disinformation. You say your new disinformation governance board is going to help the public with disinformation. You claim it's not going to be about domestic, it's going to be about foreigners and those evil Russians. So here's my question. The FBI concludes that the Steele dossier was full of Russian disinformation. CNN propagated this disinformation gladly for years and years. The difference, I guess, between your opinion and our opinion is that as despicable as it is that CNN propagated this disinformation, I wouldn't shut them down. I wouldn't lecture them. I wouldn't put it on a government website that CNN's wrong for propagating disinformation. The problem you have is you're not even willing to admit, I mean, we can't even have an agreement on what the FBI said was disinformation. How do you propose that you're going to have an office of disinformation governance if you see the problem in even determining what is disinformation?
Oh, Senator, because our work is not focused on disinformation writ large. Where we, the Department of Homeland Security, become involved is when there's a connectivity between disinformation and threats to the security of the homeland.
Well, that's what the Russians might be considered that. You mentioned the Russians the other day when you tried to pivot away from this being about censorship. Well, that's what the Russians might be considered that. You mentioned the Russians the other day when you tried to pivot away from this being about censorship. Well, that's what the Russians might be considered that. You mentioned the Russians the other day when you tried to pivot away from this being about censorship. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Senator. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Weena? Well, what happens to them? Don't stand there like fatted cattle. Will you answer me?
They have to work within something they call the rules. The rules are a body of spiritual principles that they must follow in order to be allowed to exist. They are aware that there are benevolent forces that will prevent them from achieving their goals unless we give them permission.
We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein. We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein.
Well, the Gates Foundation has partnered with DFID on a great number of things, and among those are work we do together on livestock, helping animals survive either by having vaccines or better genetics.
We were at one of these meetings yesterday, and I remember that a lady told you that she had had 8 children, and 4 of them had died in childbirth or shortly thereafter. But if all of them had survived, she'd have 8 children. And what the developing world does not need is more children.
And I think that was the biggest aha to Bill and me when we got into this work, is we asked ourselves, of course, the same hard-nosed question you'd ask, which is, if you get into this work and you start to save these children, will women just keep overpopulating the world? And thank goodness the converse is absolutely true. So they don't do that, because women say to themselves they want 2 children to survive into adulthood. If she knows that 2 will survive into adulthood, she will naturally bring down her population. And so as soon as she starts to see that getting them vaccinated or keeping them alive during the birth, she won't have as many children. That she knows that 2 will survive into adulthood, she will naturally bring down her population. And so as soon as she starts to see that getting them vaccinated or keeping them alive during the birth, she won't have as many children. That she knows that 2 will survive into adulthood, she will naturally bring down her population. And so as soon as she starts to see that getting them vaccinated or keeping them alive during the birth, she won't have as many children.
He flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it. We did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally, and we do that by buying treasury bills or bonds or other government guaranteed securities, and that actually increases the money supply. We also print actual currency, and we distribute that through the Federal Reserve banks.
All our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash, and there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those 2 issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
And if you look at verse 8 of this same chapter, you'll see it in the B part of the verse, not in the beginning of it, but in the B part. Babylon says, I am, and none else beside me. Ooh, how you gonna say that, Babylon? How you gonna say that? That's something only God can say, I am. That's why Jesus said before Abraham was, I am. That's why they picked up stones, because they knew what he was saying. You can't say, I am, Babylon. That's a sign of pride.
How do you think the world will end? If you knew the end of the world was here, would you be at home with your family? In the only safe place you know, or thought you knew? What if the real enemy was within the human heart? Your own heart.
Is this about the emergency broadcast?
Yeah, martial law, we on lockdown, the whole country.
You've been warned.
The day of truth is here.
You demon! You demon! You know who's doing this? What are you talking about? You one of them? It's never too late to change. If this is all the time I have with my son, I'm gonna spend it with him right the now.
Clarence!
Put the gun down! And then every man's sword shall be against his brother.
What should we do?
I remember they'd always say one thing. It's coming.
The title of the message tonight is, we're going to continue in the judgment of Babylon. It's called The Judgment of Babylon, Balenciaga. All right? Balenciaga. And let me tell you, in the church before I was woke, and let me tell you, in the church before I was woke, and let me tell you, in the church before I was woke. So if you remember, just by way of recap, we talked about some of the judgments that Babylon was going to get. Number one, their power would be broken. Secondly, we talked about luxury and ease also being taken away. God telling Babylon in the next verse is, look, roll up the dress, put your locks, tie up your locks. The ease is over. You're going to be grinding at the millstone, which was slave work, which was prisoner work. And so not only was power broken, but luxury and ease are going to be taken away. They're going to eventually be treated as slaves and captives, And once again, this is both ancient Babylon and modern Babylon. And we got to get ready to be able to see all these things that's coming to pass. The power broken, luxury and ease taken away. Them, instead of putting people in slavery, going to be treated as slaves themselves. All right? Now, let me give y'all some scriptures of what happens to us when we get proud, whether individually or as a nation. Proverbs 11:2. If they can pull that up, and I'm going to be moving kind of quickly, sound boot from these scriptures. It say, when pride cometh, then cometh what? Shame. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Anytime something or someone is about to be destroyed, you'll always know, because a sign of that impending doom is going to be pride. They're going to lift themselves up, and then destruction is going to happen. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Anytime something or someone is about to be destroyed, you'll always know, because a sign of that impending doom is going to be pride. They're going to lift themselves up, and then destruction is going to happen.
That we look out for you, while we bankers and brokers are only a few. But if you saw that, you'd take back the power. Hence, daily terrors to make you all cower. The panics, the crashes, the wars, and the illness that keep you from finding your spiritual wholeness. We rig the game, and we buy out both sides to keep you enslaved in your pitiful lives. So, go out and work as your body clock fades. And when it's all over, a few years from the grave, you'll look back on all this, and just then you'll see that your life was nothing, a mere fantasy. There are very few things that we don't now control. To have lawyers and police force was always a goal, doing our bidding while you march on the street. But they never realize that they're only just sheep. For real power resides in the hands of a few.
But you never call wrong right and right wrong. All right? And so in Babylon, they was having a problem, y'all. They was off into some crazy sensual, sexual stuff. And we see this happening in America right now, y'all. Y'all, I just was on the news. And I was watching as Nancy Pelosi and Congress, them just passed that in the House, man. And they crying about a marriage act and stuff like that, man. And I want to tell you, as I was watching that, a word popped up in my spirit, judgment. You understand what I'm saying? Judgment popped up in my spirit. Listen, man. Listen, America and Babylon gonna pay, y'all, every time they go against God. And listen, I understand the brainwashing. I understand the feelings that they can invoke. They can make you feel anything with that tube. All right? If they want, they can make you love somebody and hate somebody else. They can make you go with the good guy, or you could be cheering for the criminal. And I done watched some movies where I'm cheering for the bank robber. I'm like, oh, kill him, get him, kill him, get him. And I'm like, oops, hold on, I'm supposed to be a believer. You know what I'm saying? But it's the way that the director manipulate the movie and the scenes. Let me tell you something. They directing everything, y'all. Formulating your opinions. And now you think that wrong is right and right is wrong. But one thing it doesn't do, it don't change God's opinion about it. And it don't change the fact that judgment is coming.
Let my people go.
The slaves are mine. Their lives are mine. All that they own is mine. I do not know your God, nor will I let Israel go.
The Lord of hosts will do battle for us. Behold his mighty hand.
God opens the sea with the blast of his nostrils.
Lead them through the midst of the waters. His will be done.
He opens the waters before them, and he bars our way with fire. Let us go from this place. Men cannot fight against a God.
Better to die in battle with a God than live in shame.
Praise God and down into it!